welcome to the Aqua Caribbean Blue Economy Conference panel, Equitable Collaborations. Why Equitable Collaborations is the best framework to create a diverse community of ocean activists. My name is Sabrina Clarke-Okwubanego, and I am the CEO and founder of Build Global, a transformation advisory that is committed to building businesses that last. And I will be your moderator for this conversation with the stellar panel that we have amongst our midst today. Our panel have focused their commitments to the blue economy, ensuring that there is a better stewardship of our ocean, blue resources, and climate. They've used innovation either through deep ocean exploration, technology, activism, or community building. They all have had purpose-driven impact using equitable collaborations as a strategy to create a community of diverse explorers and ocean activists. And today they're here to share their insights with all of us. Please join me in welcoming our first panelist, Veta Wade. Veta is the founder of Aqua Montserrat and the Equitable Collaboration Framework. She is also the founder of the conference that we are all fortunate to be experiencing. She is an award-winning advocate, recognized by Ocean Awards 2020 as a leader on marine conservation issues within the Caribbean through her nonprofit organization, Fish and Fins. Her diverse experience spans 20 years from employee at a law firm to eco-fashion freelancer to a serial entrepreneur, consultant, and sustainability ambassador. Welcome, Veta.
Good day, and it's a pleased to be with everybody today.
Thank you. And we are also joined by Jeremy McKane. Jeremy is an international artist, underwater photographer, and founder of Ultramarine Ocean Action Summit. Jeremy is an artist with a technology background. At 18, he found himself working in a startup that would one day become, for a time, the largest web hosting provider. Today, the company is known as Veta. As an artist, McKane's work has been shown around the world and often includes a mixture of technology and thought-provoking imagery about our oceans. McKane uses art to engage the public to do something about the threats facing the ocean. He is also the founder of Ocean Trademark that aims to protect our oceans by reducing enforcement expense, defining value with the biodiversity that exists within. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me.
And certainly, finally, but not least, we have Katy Croff-Bell. Katy is the director of the Open Ocean Initiative at the MIT Media Lab and a National Geographic explorer. Katy has led the Open Ocean Initiative, which is dedicated to reimagining the future of ocean exploration and community building. Her background is in deep sea exploration using robotic and telepresence technologies to explore what lies at the depths of the ocean. Since 1999, she has led or participated in more than 25 oceanographic and archaeological projects, at the Ocean Exploration Trust, where she was chief scientist of the Nautilus Exploration Program, working with a large global team of scientists, engineers, and educators to conduct multiple disciplinary expeditions aboard EV Nautilus in the Mediterranean, Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, and Pacific Ocean. It is a mouthful because you have done a lot, Katy. Katy Croff-Bell. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and welcome, Katy.
Thank you, Sabrina.
So I think it's appropriate, Veta, to start with you because you are a living example of someone who is a force for ocean optimism and a source of purpose-driven impact. And everyone on our panel today has had purpose-driven impact in various ways. We're here because of your vision. So between Fish and Fins and Aqua Montserrat, the Blue Zone, you have been very, very impactful and created a very diverse ecosystem in an inclusive way. So do you think a diverse, purpose-driven ecosystem is how we can engage with inclusion when it comes to ocean activists and ocean optimism?
Yeah, I thank you so much for the very flattering introduction. But yeah, certainly I think that having a diverse ecosystem around the solutions is incredibly important. I hail from the Caribbean, and there are so many unsung voices and champions and heroes in this area that whose voices I believe and their work do require being highlighted and being part of conversations such as this. And it's very interesting because just even today I was talking so much to a local fisher, and he was telling me about his dad and how his dad was one of the first marine biologists or conservationists he knew, because they used to hunt turtles at the time. And in 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 that whole process, the dad noticed that not only were fishers heard hunting turtles, but they were hunting eggs. And so dad would wake up really early in the morning and brush the sand, really brush away the turtle tracks, and cover back up the eggs, even out the area, so that nobody realized that a turtle had nested there. And so when you're talking about conservation and really being able to engage community and peers, it's so important to have a really wide cross section. It's very different to myself or an NGO or conservation group coming in and talking about why we should protect the turtles and why this is important. But when we actually see it happening on the community and we see heroes like that, it's so important to bring them into the conversation and to partner equally on an eye-to-eye level. And again, one of the things that I'm so proud about in regards to the action that we're taking now for collaboration around the blue economy and opportunities for the ocean is that sort of business support as well, so people can actually see where the opportunities are for business, for education, and for other opportunities as well in this space. And coming from a wide cross section. So I think oftentimes we see the ocean environment as a space where you have to be a scientist or you have to be a diver or something like this. And so in my work and my experience, I've been very committed to trying to open folks' eyes to the fact that no matter what your skill base is, you have a part to play in the story, in the solution. And this is also evident in our team. We have all sorts of folks working on from acting and the creative industry, from the business support industry, tech space, and so on. So it takes all of us to bring about the solutions that we want to see for our oceans.
Thanks, Veta. And I think a broad coalition can only be helpful because you're bringing in different disciplines of experience and expertise to then problem solve and collaborate as a collective. And Jeremy, you have been able to achieve this. You have done several things within your career and within your experience. And I wanted to pick up on the point that Veta made about bringing together such a diverse range and group of people between business individuals and actors, because you yourself are an artist. You have a technology background. You've been able to bring together business individuals as well as activists and everyone in between at the Ultramarine Ocean Action Summit. And so why was it important for you to have purpose-driven impact through technology and art and bringing together that broad coalition?
I think it's a great question. I think, when we think about the ocean, a lot of times we don't think about it, right? I live in a small place called Dallas, Texas, and very rarely do people think about the oceans. But, right now, this broadcast is being sponsored by the ocean. Every second breath comes from the ocean. And so whether we realize it or not, the ocean plays a major impact on all of our lives. So it makes sense for all of us to be aware. The reason why we really felt like this is, we felt like a lot of people, were very, I guess, siloed based. Politicians talk to politicians, scientists to scientists. And there is crossover from time to time. But we thought, well, if the scientists have already gone out there and said, these are the things that we need to do to create real change and action, then what if we just put the people together in the same room to do that? Jacques Cousteau famously said, people will love people love what they understand, but if they don't understand something, right, then how can they even begin to? I just butchered his quote, by the way, but the sentiment is like, people just don't really understand what is in the oceans that can help them and sustain life. I mean, what Veta's doing is amazing, because she's really getting people there to see what's beneath the surface. And that's the kind of thing that we really need to do. So to answer your question, I mean, I incorporated art and all these other kinds of things along with my co-host Susie Mai, because we felt that, the shortest path between two humans is art. And if we can, we can create these, graphs and spreadsheets of why we need to protect the oceans. But when we use art and we connect with individuals, it really helps tell a story in a very different way. And for me, I look back on all of the different conversations, whether they were in tech or the art side or just the community building side, and each one of those things provides a valuable role. And I think the last thing I'd bring up here is that a lot of times there are voices that are just generally not heard. And I think it's really important that when we put people together, that we think about people who don't have a voice, whether that they're marginalized groups, maybe they're people of color or indigenous voices. Why aren't these voices included? They need to be included. And I think when we start to look at this global issue and we start removing, political lines and things that that generally divide us, we realize that we're just crew members of Spaceship Earth, and we really need to solve this issue because it is probably one of the greatest issues that humankind has yet to conquer.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I'm already seeing some themes between what both you and Veta are saying around bringing in the voiceless, or the voices that you don't typically hear, around the table to engage, understanding that people operating within their silos isn't as effective as people coming together. And then I love your shortest distance between two people is art phrase. I think that's an amazing way to frame it. And then getting beneath the surface. And that actually leads us very nicely to Katy, who goes way beneath the surface, deep into exploration, and also builds a coalition of academics, as well as scientists, as well as community, brings together two things people typically don't find. So that very core discipline, quantitative research, but also the qualitative aspect of engagement. And so wanted to bring you in this conversation as well. And similar question to you around your coalition and being able to engage in the way that you have through deep ocean exploration and community building. What are your thoughts in terms of just using those as enablers to creating a very diverse community centered around action?
Yeah, I think that both of those aspects, the quantitative and the qualitative, are absolutely essential for expanding access to really truly understanding the deep sea and the processes that are going on there. Excuse me. Historically, having access to the deep sea meant requirements of having a very large ship, having multi-million-dollar robotic vehicles, having a lot of things that are extremely expensive, extremely inaccessible, on the inefficient side. And so it results in this sort of elite group of, typically Western Eurocentric scientists doing this kind of work. But right now, I think is really a really exciting moment, because technology is getting smaller, it's getting cheaper, it's getting more accessible. So now is really the time that, before a lot of these less expensive capabilities come online, is the opportune time to start to build a global coalition and not have it just be led by the US or European countries or the countries that have historically had access to and been able to do this kind of work, but rather to build up that kind of community to be able to do the research that is going to be required to really explore the entire ocean, which is huge and is going to take a long time and a lot of effort and way more people and way more diverse voices on the team. So I'm personally really excited about this time.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to go back to the two themes both you, Katy, and Jeremy have brought up, which is technology, and wanted to pull that out specifically and ask, from your perspective, do you think that technology is the key enabler now to facilitate a diverse ecosystem of individuals and activists around deep ocean exploration, ocean optimism, climate, etc.? And I'll start with you first, Katy.
Sure. I think that it is an enabler, but it's not the only one. Mm-hmm. If you look at any number of tech solutions, it always comes back to people, right? Who's adopting it, who's using it, who is getting access to it. So I think that, yes, we absolutely need technology to be able to explore the ocean. Just to be able to get down there, you can't do it yourself. But we also need people on board. We need to design for communities that have been historically excluded. We need to work with people to ensure that the technology is accessible for people.
Thanks. And Jeremy, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I actually totally agree with Katy. I mean, I think sometimes in the tech world, the solutions that exist are often solving a problem that doesn't exist. And so I think it's really important that when we do have technological advances or capabilities, and we're pulling things off the shelf, I think it's important that we actually lean very heavily on our marine biologists and our scientists, because they're the ones that are in the field that are trying to tackle some of these big issues. And I think that everything comes in balance. And I think the reason why we're discussing the oceans today is because the world is in a huge imbalance. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that pandemic is directly related to our improper connection to wildlife and their habitats. And so I think, if we're going to solve a problem, we really need to be very clear on what that problem is and look at what tools we have to be able to accomplish whatever goals that need to be set forth.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Veta, a slightly different question, but along the same theme. So we're all here in an amazing virtual conference using technology. You're sitting in Montserrat. I'm in London. Jeremy's in Texas. And Katy, I think, where are you? I didn't ask the question. Where are you hailing from, Katy?
I'm in Rhode Island.
You're in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Oh, my word. That's a conversation for another day. My mom is in Providence at the moment.
Oh, no way.
I know. So let's focus. Back on track. So Veta, we are here all around the world at a conference that you founded using technology to talk about quite important and amazing things. So from your perspective, is technology the enabler? Is it how to use and engage individuals around the impact that you're trying to achieve?
It's a start. It's a start to be able to build these networks and collaborations that are necessary, especially in small islands such as the one that I'm from. I'm on an island, 4,500 people, and it would be very difficult to get hold of Jeremy or Katy in person if it was not for technology. Technology has allowed us to do a lot in terms of networking and building the teams and collaborators that we need to be able to pull off events such as this, which provides a lot of interesting and useful insights and inspiration and network for folks who are of like mind. What I'm mindful though of with regards to technology was, much of what was said already. But we still, say for instance, in the Caribbean, for as an example, there are still so many of our communities that don't have access to technology. People may not just have the money to top up their mobile phones and pay for the data. Mm-hmm. They may not have even access to stable internet. And so we still have a long way to go in terms of making this space inclusive enough that across communities and especially more vulnerable communities can access this information, this network, to be able to elevate, upskill, and get this type of exposure. And so it all comes back around to the fact that a lot of work is still necessary on the ground within communities and empowering community leaders. And activities, organizations, and initiatives such as the one that I have here and many more in the Caribbean, that allows to take all this information to and within communities as well. So yes, we're making some very good, strong strides, but we still need to be able to pull along those who are still less fortunate in space.
I absolutely agree with it. And you also bring us quite nicely into the panel topic that we're here to discuss: equitable collaboration, pulling people along, bringing people together, using our resources, pooling those resources, making sure we're hearing voices around the table. So if somebody doesn't have access to technology, for example, they have people who may, if they don't have access to thought leadership, they have individuals who can come together for a specific purpose. So I wanted to just stay with you, Veta, and to talk about the equitable collaboration framework and starting there first, and then broadening the discussion. So what is the equitable collaboration framework?
Yeah, well, it's I've been doing a lot of thinking, over the past few years, especially in the early parts of or sort of late last year. A lot of lessons learned as a nonprofit operating in this conservation space. Being dependent on grant funding, the struggle to make this good work continue, and also relationships that we have with which provide massive opportunities, but sometimes these opportunities where we're either not able to be strategic about how we best benefit with them, or we're not able to really create those pathways for our international friends in the region or NGOs to best work with us most efficiently. So in all of this, I was in a state of I at one point I was really cussing and annoyed. And then I thought to myself, and feeling despair. But then I thought to myself, how can we be more solution focused? And what is it that what are some of the solutions in terms of actions that we can really take? And so this thought process came around to me creating this this framework, and it's really looking at how can we better build the capacity and the capability in the Caribbean for the blue economy, so our ocean opportunities. How do we increase representation and capacity within our NGOs and our blue organizations? And also, and very importantly, is what are some of the things that we should be looking at in terms of providing pathways for those who want to support the Caribbean and conservation work in the region to work very effectively, so that we are able to see the changes filter through and be most impactful. So this is pretty much what the framework, covers. And in many ways, I suppose it's a model for community-led governance that really supports ocean justice and sustainable development for everyone.
It sounds pretty amazing, to be honest, and lots of components, but also with layers of complexity, because you are bringing together very specific stakeholders who have their own thoughts, agendas in terms of how to move things forward. So before we start to unpack the complexities around it, I just want to come over to you, Jeremy, because Veta is looking at equitable collaboration in that framework in the context of the Caribbean, and that model can be shifted and used around the world. How have you used equitable collaboration just as a baseline for your work for Ultramarine, Ocean Summit, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, Ultramarine was really kind of a side effect of some of the work that I was doing with our group, my company called Ocean Currency Network, or we call it Ocean for short. But as you can probably imagine, you run into a lot of really great people, and in certain circles, you think, wow, this person's working on this really amazing thing. I might not necessarily do anything directly with this individual, but this individual needs to meet this other person. And so this kept happening a lot. And my co-founder, Susie Mai, and I said, we really need a venue for people who are willing to act. And so what we found is we found groups of individuals who, well, they're weird, right? In fact, actually, that was one of the things that first came to me. When we first went to Necker Island, Richard Branson came to me during lunchtime and said, Jeremy, I've had an opportunity to kind of meet everybody and say hello. And they're all just these vastly different backgrounds. We've never had this kind of a diverse group of people on Necker before. And for such a short time, because it was a very short time that we were on island. And he goes, how did you do it? And here was my opportunity to give Richard Branson some advice, and I failed miserably. And I said, well, Richard, at the end of the day, I'm just really weird, and so are these people. And you know what? For this brief moment, we all feel normal because we all want to see real change happening with the oceans. And so I think sometimes, and it was really great. Richard kind of came back and said, he goes, well, it's the weird ones that will make the most amount of impact. So keep up the good work. But I often look at, the work that each of, my co-panelists here are working on. Like, you guys are all weird too. You're doing really cool stuff that's really weird. And when we kind of break that mold a little bit, it does a number of things, right? It especially for kids. Kids see that, it's like, wow, that's so cool. I've never thought about that before. And it gives them something to get started. It's like kindling to a beautiful fire, right? They have something that they can actually look and aspire to do something really amazing. And I mean, I'm really honored to be on this group of amazing visionaries, because I'm very impressed with the work that each of you have done, and it's very humbling to share this conversation with you. So thanks for including me.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think that's the antidote. If you're weird, problem solved. Katy, over to you. Similar question. So in terms of your work and the strategies that you deployed, how has equitable collaboration been effective as a strategy for you?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I hosted the 2018 National Ocean Exploration Forum, excuse me, with NOAA. And this was the 5th or 6th in a series of events over the prior 5 years or so. And the theme of this particular forum was supposed to be on broadening participation in ocean exploration, which is why I volunteered to host it, because I was very excited and wanted to bring lots of ideas to the table. But one of the challenges was that all of the prior forums had been invitation only. And as a result, you saw the same people going to every event every year, typically pretty white. And by pretty white, I mean almost completely all academics, government, and industry, right? So we decided to make a lot of changes to this next event. And we had an open application process, which resulted in hundreds of applications to apply. We were looking for a broad diversity of people, from, geographical representation, cultural, racial, sort of topical, I guess. And we also sponsored people to come to the event, people that couldn't afford to come otherwise. So we sponsored 40 participants of almost 300 or so who were there. And it was hands down the most diverse ocean exploration forum that had occurred yet, which was so exciting. We had students, we had early career, we had artists, we had musicians, we had all kinds of different people. And it was so exciting. And for me, not just because I was the host of it, but also just as a participant and having participated in so many more, it had so much more energy and ideas and collaborations that came out of it. And then a year and a half later, I was attending the Ocean Sciences meeting in San Diego. This is a big ocean sciences conference. And there were so many people that came to me and said, hey, I was in touch with this person and we collaborated on this poster or this talk or whatever. And so tons and tons of amazing projects came out of it, which was super exciting to see. But I think the most important thing that came out of it was demonstrating that it really has to be a deliberate choice, and you have to put resources behind making events or projects or initiatives, or fill in the blank there, more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive than it has been before. But you can't rely on it being serendipitous. Jeremy, I'm pumped that it did work out for you, that you got lots of weirdos on Necker Island. But
people who are weird, not weirdos. Nuance,
I call myself
very important.
That's totally fine. But you really have to be committed and put resources behind it to truly, I think, make a long-term dent. And by dent, I mean complete shift in the other direction, because we've been doing it the way we've always been doing it for too long. And if we continue that route, then nothing will ever change.
Thank you. And I want to stay on this point now for a little bit, because the key word in equitable collaborations is equity. And getting equity, getting a balance of power, shared responsibility, though it sounds very easy when we're having this conversation, is not an easy thing to do. And it's not an easy thing to execute, particularly when you're dealing with multiple stakeholders. Everyone has varying interests. You mentioned a very important point about money and investments, and typically when money and investments get involved, it makes it even more complex and sometimes a challenge to manage. So I want to first start with being very specific about the strategies you've used to be successful, and then we're going to come back to challenges. So if I come back to you, Veta, in terms of getting equity and being very specific about what strategies, what practical things, or everyone listening around the world, did you employ to be successful with your collaborations in the Caribbean and getting global people at a conference now to talk to you about this topic? What are some of the key things, 1 to 2 things that you can specifically point to and say, yes, this is a strategy I adapted and others can adapt that might be useful?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. Good question. And I wish I had a really powerful answer for it. But it's really just people connecting with people, enjoying stories from people, enjoying to building relationships with people and friendships, and through that you just connect with people. That's how I met Jeremy. It was through another friend of mine who recommended I speak to her friend in Ocean Tech when I was talking on an Ocean Tech panel, and then they were like, oh, you need to speak to Jeremy. And then Jerry and I spoke. We were supposed to speak for an hour. We ended up speaking for 3 hours, and that was just, it's not a matter of like collaborating about anything in particular. We just wanted to get to know each other a little bit, understand what the work was, and then later on, look, we have an opportunity to collaborate, and that has happened with the Aqua Caribbean Blue Economy Conference. And again, another friend and mentor of mine, Iana Johnson, through Iana, I've met up with Dr. Katy, and then I had the ability to ask, can you support me in this? But critical, really, which I think is important, is knowing your why, knowing what it is, why you want to do the work you do. And by knowing why you choose to do this, and you're able to share this story, it allows folks to be able to align their visions, their projects, and be able to connect about how their own stories, feed around that. And so I think it's very important to understand why you're doing the work you do, and it allows others to be able to support you by being able to share and tell that story.
That is a powerful answer. So there is power in simplicity. There is power in storytelling. There is power in your why. And in 2020, there is power in being a decent human being that's interested in other decent human beings.
And taking time, just taking time to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That is not an underestimated strategy at all. And I think people sometimes need to be reminded of being human, and humanity works as a starting point, if not for anything else. Jeremy, over to you. Similar question. What can you say specifically, 1 to 2 things, practical things that you've deployed that makes your equitable collaboration so successful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna echo some of the phrases that Veta had said. I mean, because I totally agree with her approach as well. I mean, I think one of the things I really felt early on that I saw that was a problem is there was a lot of kind of like ego and kind of infighting inside these ocean groups, and I really felt like that there wasn't really a place. If we're going to really see real action, there's no place for that. And there was several individuals that wanted to be the Superman of the ocean. I often have said that there is no Superman of the ocean, but there is a Justice League, and all of us can be part of that Justice League. And I think it's really important when we realize that, because we don't have the answers, but collectively we do have the answers. In Hawaii, there's a phrase that is often used. They say, "Hey, Brock, come on over. We're going to come talk story." And there might be business to be had, but a good majority of the time is spent talking about just life. It's in those moments that we actually realize that there are some really, just beautiful gems that if these were curated, they would have never come out. It's actually the same reason why when we meet on Necker Island that we've had people there before that said, okay, well, we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to have lunch, and then after lunch, we're going to have more panel discussions, and then after that, more panel discussions. And thankfully, Richard has been like, no, we're not going to do that. After lunch, we're going to play. And we can get together after that and maybe have a chat. But Richard was really kind of instrumental in that process, because he really feels like a lot of these things that we do in these groups where we just talk and talk and talk. Sometimes we get on panels just to hear ourselves talk, unfortunately. Well, what happens when we actually break those barriers and we sit down and we actually listen to another individual who maybe they come from a background where all of what they know is oral history, an oral tradition. And I've found myself in the middle of the Lao group in Fiji, going to places that very rarely do visitors get a chance to go, and sitting there and just listening to the stories of how they've created tapus, which are the first real marine sanctuaries. Amazing stuff, and what could we use from this knowledge and adapt in other ways? What I found was probably one of the most successful things on Necker was the fact that we had these moments, right? And it doesn't sound like it's productive. Having a bunch of really, passionate and smart people about ocean, conservation, going and sitting in the hot tub and talking about, lionfish and all these other kinds of things. It doesn't sound productive, but it is incredibly productive because it was those social bonds that were created there that have led to some pretty amazing things. And so I think sometimes we overplan and we try to curate too much. I think that we should have an outline, but I don't think that we should decide what the outcome should be before we start. And I think, the biggest thing, I mentioned this before, is including voices that often don't get a choice. It's kind of like, finding the undiscovered genius. You might have somebody that has a brilliant idea or very passionate about executing on something, but maybe because of their economic resources or where they're from, where they grew up, it could be a number of different factors. They'll never get a chance. So how can we find those voices? How can we amplify those voices? And that's really what this is about. It's about amplifying those voices because guess what? We're out of time. We have no more time to sit around and think about ideas. We need to act. We need to do. The main question I often get sometimes is, well, what's the one little thing that I can do? You know what? And I tell them there's no little thing that you can do. In the 1970s, if you had asked me that question, which I wasn't really around, there were little things you could do, but we're far past that now. We are in the 6th mass extinction, and we need to take action like our lives depend on it because they do.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I'm going to come to you in just a second, Katy. And I wanted to follow up just on the do, because I know everyone will probably be thinking this. And so I figured I'd just ask it now and we can move on. What did you do, Jeremy, to get from your why to Necker Island?
So I was always really impressed with, the creation of the elders and the carbon war room. And I've always thought like, wow, what Richard did on Necker was amazing, along with some really other great people like Nelson Mandela and Jimmy Carter and Peter Gabriel. But I never thought in a million years that was within the scope of something that I wanted to do. And I actually would bring some friends of mine to another place in Australia, and we'd often talk about things. But as I remember, the real turning point for me was in COP21 when I was in Paris. And here we are talking about climate change, and very little conversations, if any at all, we're talking about the oceans. And I'm like, hello, the oceans and climate change are intrinsically connected. You cannot separate them. The ocean is the largest carbon sink. And it became very frustrating to me. And it was probably at that moment where I probably became a little bit more, tougher on the issue. But somewhere along the lines, through friends, I met Susie Mai. And Susie also became disenchanted with this whole idea of conservation and sometimes blue washing, as we would call it. And I said, science has already told us what we need to do. We just need to get people in there that will commit to action. And so she was the one that kind of said, hey, well, what if we did it on Necker Island? I'm like, that would be amazing, And they pitched the idea to Richard, and Richard really loved the idea. And he's been a real champion for the cause. And so I think that's great. Right. But I think we still need to do more. And in these conversations, people probably listening to us now and say, man, this is absolutely, we need to do more. What can we do? And I think the best answer I can give to someone that says, well, what can I do? Is I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do, but you probably do something better than anyone else. Do that thing, but focus it for this. Could be you run a podcast. Could be you run it on TV. Could be anything, right? Talk about all the issues that we need to solve right now in regards to the oceans, and I think we'll be in a much better place.
Thanks, Jeremy. And there are consistent things between what you and Veta are saying: the people, the network, the conversation, the storytelling. And Katy, actually, led us into being intentional about what we're doing. You have to focus. And I want to return now back to you, Katy, because you started to give us some gems around being intentional, around looking around the room and seeing, actually, this is not the reflection that we want in order for us to move forward. So similar question again to you around what are the practical strategies you started to share in terms of allocating resources, budget, etc. But any other additional gems you want to share in terms of equitable collaborations that would be useful for and valuable for people to understand? 1 to 2 things.
Sure. I think the one most important thing for me that I've learned over the past few years is simply to listen. And, people are out there, people are smart, they're doing awesome work, but sometimes people just aren't listening to them. And so in my prior life, organizing huge expeditions on ships and all these sorts of things, oftentimes we'd go into a country, we'd do a project, we'd collect data, and we would come home. Sometimes we had very little interaction with the people who actually lived in that country. Sometimes we had a lot of interaction and co-planned and co-executed the projects with them. And those projects were oftentimes the most successful. It was when we were actually working with people from there, rather than just sort of putting a name on paper to get the permit to be able to do the work that we wanted to do, right? And so after I left OET 3 years ago, my time at the Media Lab has been truly a lot of listening and trying to learn, recognizing that was a problem, the way that we were doing it, but then also trying to figure out how to change and pivot and to do it differently. So the last few months, my team has been, actually, we've got a few teams have been working on various different projects, some on low-cost data collection platforms, some on data analysis. But then we also have a research design team that's been doing a lot of listening. We've interviewed 20 people from around the world, Veta being one of them, who's provided all kinds of amazing insight. And we're, trying to, figure out what are the big takeaways from those interviews, like what do people actually need? What do they want? What do their communities need? And so I think that the number one takeaway for me is, and I hope this is useful for others as well, is really to listen to other people and to see what the needs are, and not just assuming that you know better than everyone else and going down whatever route you think because of your own background and experiences.
Thanks, Katy. And so I wanted to shift now slightly to some of the cynicism or criticism that people may have, and what are your thoughts in terms of how you respond to that? So someone listening to our conversation now can say, and this is an Aqua Caribbean conference for Caribbean people, and it could be easily said, well, we do oral history. This is what we do. We talk, we share stories, we do listen. But how does this actually work for us? Why should we do this in the Caribbean? How can equitable collaborations work for the Caribbean? Because the Caribbean context is very different from the Western context or the rest of the world. So what would be your response to that, Veta? So when people say, this is great, but it's not going to work here, what is your response to a commentary like that?
Yeah, in regards to us here, all Caribbean people, by our very nature, there's a sort of conservation in our DNA. We've grown up very in tune with our environments. Whether or not we realize it or we don't, sometimes maybe we take it for granted because it's always there. The sea is always there. The sea breezes are, the coastal views are always in our sight. So it's sometimes easy for us to take this for granted. But in our very nature, we depend on this for happiness. We depend on it for our enjoyment, our health, and COVID-19 taught us that in the Caribbean. When people were sick with COVID and people were fearful of COVID, where did everybody rush to? Scream to go to, complain to the governments that beaches were being shut down. Everybody wanted to go heal themselves at the sea. And I know even on my island, a lot of people would say that is how they got over the COVID. It wasn't through any other medication. It was just being healed by the sea. Now, if the sea is going to do that for us, healing us, protecting us, especially in these climate crazy times, then it is incumbent upon us to be responsible and to take care of it so that it continues to take care of us. And so, that's what I would say for now.
Mm. And what about you? You brought up the point around COVID, and certainly from your perspective, Jeremy and Katy. And I'll start with you first on this response, Katy. What do you say to people who might say, well, actually, we're dealing with a pandemic right now. I can't focus on anything else other than making sure that I'm isolating or social distancing, and I'll deal with deep ocean exploration and everything else later. What would be your response to that?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't think the same thing sometimes. Like, I'm homeschooling my daughter. My husband and I are working at home. We don't see anybody. And yeah, I totally get it. In addition to the pandemic, the elections in the US are happening right now, tons of social unrest, social justice issues. There's so much going on in the world. But I constantly have to remind myself that the ocean is key to life on this planet, and we have to keep the long game in mind. You know, COVID eventually, like the 19 pandemic, like every other pandemic and plague that has struck humankind throughout history, eventually will go away. And we need to be ready. We need to do the groundwork now while we can, so that once we can get back together and we can get back to sea, and I can go to Montserrat to visit Veta and her amazing students that she works with, that we can continue to do this really critical work.
Thanks. And any additional builds on the COVID point? So you both are in the States. Veta, you're in the Caribbean. You look like you were going to say something, Veta. Did you want to come in?
I just wanted to also, on the COVID point and the situation that we find ourselves in here in terms of economics, we're not seeing tourists coming into the islands. We're not going to see that for a while. And, every day, somebody messaged me this morning talking about how, this is really beginning to affect them psychologically, stressed out, not sure where the incomes are coming from, not sure. We're importing so many different items. There's a real need for the Caribbean to localize not only its skills, but its services. And there's also a real need for us to start to look at opportunities for our community, our young people who are coming out, graduating from school, our businesses that are having to sort of pivot. Where are these opportunities? And the blue economy and our blue opportunities are really in terms of how we manage our ocean resources and the skills we develop and utilize. It could be our art skills, our design skills, all sorts of different things, our media skills to help push this work forward. It's a really new opportunity, and it requires a really big and diverse team. And so for us as a Caribbean region, I think it's very timely that we start to look at these opportunities as to how it can provide infrastructure improvements that we need, the renewable energy that we so desperately need to be able to function and to create business, foreign direct investments in our region, and really in terms of how we continue to steward that space, going right back to taking care of the ocean like it takes care of us. So it's a huge opportunity for us to become more self-reliant and to also start to create new job and income streams for our people. So strategically, I think the Aqua-Caribbean Conference and the work we're doing in terms of collaboration and highlighting the opportunities that might exist is very critical at this time.
Thanks, Veta and Katy. So you're both talking about the challenges that COVID has presented, either working from home, being at home with children, isolation, etc. But there's also the opportunities that it presents in terms of localization, skill sets, investments, going back to the central point on the ocean. Now there is a distance between now and when you can visit Veta in the near future. And in between that distance is connection and people staying connected to these themes, to these causes. And Jeremy, our last question before we wind down our panel, imagine how much time flies when we're having fun. How would you suggest that we stay connected to ocean activism, to deep ocean exploration, to ocean optimism, and building the communities that we need, given everything that's happening around the world? What is your recommendation or suggestion as to how we stay connected?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think what we're doing right now is we're being creative, right? And whenever we're kind of oppressed in any kind of way, humankind finds a way to be creative, to achieve some goal. And I think we're doing this with Zoom. We're doing it with this technology as we see here. And I think it's important that we continue the storytelling. And I think it's also important that, we don't lose sight. I mean, as Katy brought out, I mean, the oceans we have to have them. If we don't have them, there is no life on the planet. And, when we think about COVID, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I have, you probably are hearing my two girls in the background that are probably reciting Hamilton at the moment. I mean, it's just, there's always something happening, and then 2 minutes later they'll be fighting and crying. It's hard, and I don't think I think it's important that as we come from different cultures, as we use this technology, I think it's also improper for me to come from, the United States saying this is how things should be done in the Caribbean. Don't know. But what we can do is we can continue to have these conversations and be open-minded. And as Katy said, we need to listen. And I think that's when really amazing things can happen. But I definitely think that we shouldn't be so closed-minded that we only focus on COVID, because this could be a big problem for us. The oceans really need our attention. And you know what? Honestly, this all sounds doom and gloom, but at the end of the day, this is the most exciting time to be alive. We have the technology, we have the capability of having these conversations, but mostly we just lack the will to actually get this stuff done. So if we were able to really get unified and say, I don't care about your ideas, I care about how you execute. That's what's going to define your value. And if we could really, find ways to unite all of us together, I think that's what's really going to help us get out of this mess.
Thanks, Jeremy. And just on your point around uniting and stories and engagements, there is a group of individuals who are joining the conference, which are our youth. And they're looking at this conference because they've identified that they want to do something, or there was a curiosity around what this all means. And so what would be your advice to the youth who are joining us today, who recognize that ocean activism, deep ocean exploration, collaboration is something that they want to engage with? What is it? What's your message to them? And I will start with you, Katy. What is your message to youth who are joining us today?
Well, I would recommend two things. The first is definitely to stay in school and to study and be excellent in whatever it is they're interested in, because there are so many ways, as both Jeremy and Veta have said, to be involved in marine industries, in arts, in culture, in anything that has to do with the ocean. Then the second thing is to get outside and go swim and go snorkel. And if you can, go scuba dive and just be a part of it, learn about it in a very sort of tangible way. I am very fortunate I can walk to the beach from my house. And so I spend as much time as I can in the summertime and bring my daughter there as much as I can as well, so that she not only appreciates things from like, intellectually knowing about them, but also just feels them and knows them just viscerally. So stay in school, study hard, be the best at whatever you want to be, and also get out in the water.
Thanks, Katy. And Jeremy, what is your message to the youth who are joining us today?
I think the youth is probably the most powerful individuals or groups of individuals on the planet. And the main reason why is that, if I went to Katy and said, "Hey, Katy, I saw that you're using this straw to drink your drink right now," she's gonna be like, "Okay, I probably shouldn't be doing it, but you should probably mind your own business." If I was a 4-year-old little girl that said, "Did you know that that's gonna hurt the turtles in the ocean?" she's gonna feel really bad about that. She's gonna be like, "I know, I shouldn't be doing this." And what's interesting is I find that that we often think about, oh, the youth is the future, right? No, the youth is the present, right? Because when they are capable of really, articulating what some of the great threats are when it comes to the oceans, then it can create movement in adults today. And then they can carry that off also into the future. So I think that's really an important tool. And actually, one of the outcomes of our last Ultramarine gathering was to create a global youth movement around protecting 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. And there's some really amazing things that are about to be announced. But I think when we think about a youth movement like this, that you can be part of this, I think it's also important for us to help the youth identify actions and executions of what they can do. I'm all for making a lot of noise. I'm all for going into the streets and letting everybody know, but we need hard and fast actions of what needs to be done, because this is the UN Decade of Oceans. We have 10 years to do this, actually now 9 thanks to COVID. So we better get to work.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Veta, our visionary for Why Are We All Here Today, what is your message to the youth who have attended the conference?
Have fun at the work you do. Learn to swim if you don't know how to swim already. Really get involved in the sea, immerse yourself in the sea in a very safe way, connect with groups that are operating in this space in both education and adventure, groups like ours, Fish and Fins. Connect with other youth engagement groups around the Caribbean. We have organizations like the Ocean Heroes Boot Camp. We have Pop Movement. We have the Caribbean Youth Education Network. There's a lot of various groups on the ground with global connections that can really help support the ideas and sharing the education around what is necessary, and really being able to just hold hands with folks and have fun doing good work. Think big and dream big and believe that it's possible.
Thank you, Veta. And it was your dreaming and your thinking about the possible is what got us all here today and part of this amazing conference. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and for your insights on the panel today, similarly to you, Jeremy, as well as to you, Katy. It's been a very insightful conversation. It's been my pleasure to host it. And the final thing I'll say in terms of the key themes in listening to everyone, it's the power of your why, the power of the people that you know, the power of the stories around you, and your ability to use your technical skill set, whatever that technical skill set may be it arts, technology, activism, whatever it is, to bring it together in an equitable and collaborative way to achieve the goal. So thank you very much for your discussions and your insights today.
Thank you so much for having us all. And thank you so much, Jeremy and Katy, for being a part of this. Sabrina, you've been brilliant.
Anytime.
Thank you for having us, Veta.
Yeah, you guys are superheroes in my book.
Fantastic.
Blessings, everybody.